Hello and welcome to another edition of the Candidates Discussion. My name is Matthew Ogden. I'm an editor with LaRouche Television. I'm here in the studio with Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, and hooked up over Skype video are all 5 members of the national candidate slate. And I should just start by saying, obviously we're coming off of a weekend with the G8 summit, the NATO summit in Chicago, which is still going on, but you've got the British Empire in a position where they are losing or have already lost any position of strategic advantage, and they're trying to bluff to try to maintain the appearance of something that they no longer have, as can be seen by this article in The Economist magazine, attempting to say anything that is coming from Makarov, from Putin, from Medvedev is mere saber rattling, has no military significance, and is merely an empty threat, when everybody knows that it's actually the reverse. The empire has now lost its position of strategic advantage, and anybody who is defending national sovereignty against the British Empire is in the position of the strategic high ground. We know how to run a U.S. economic recovery. Our enemy doesn't. And I think that we can have a discussion on that subject here now.
Yeah, a time has come when we have to have the overall campaign policy of the combined candidacies presented with a single blow. Otherwise, we will not have the kind of impact which we must have in order to present these candidacies. They have to be presented as a candidacy in order to be effective as candidacies. Now, the first thing is that we obviously have to do a number of things. First of all, Glass-Steagall. Now, Glass-Steagall is now in a fairly good fighting position. So that's number one. Number two, we have what? We have to go to a credit system, not a monetarist system. And that is also essential. We also have to go to NWAPA. Without a perspective of 6 million jobs being started as soon as this election campaign is finished, 6 million jobs. That is 4 from NWAPA, and 2 additional things which will take in areas outside of the NWAPA range as such, but will be extended in NWAPA range, which will be the whole former automobile industry sector, which is going to have to produce many things which will be integrated with NWAPA. So that's our program. That's all we want as a program. There are ancillaries to these features, but this is the program. It's the only thing that can work. It's the only thing that will work. There is no substitute for it. We're now in a situation where we're in interim with the Obama games being played. And until we can get Obama on the way out, we cannot expect to implement these programs effectively. We're not going to be able to save the United States. Forget the question of even the war issue. But without these programs, the United States doesn't have a prayer of existing. Without Glass-Steagall, which is in fairly decent shape right now as a proposition, without the other aspects of this thing, we're not, that is going to the credit system, which very few people out there understand. Almost nobody in the citizenship understands what a credit system is. The only way we've been getting the credit system across is because of pushing both Glass-Steagall and NWAPA. So if you're not pushing NWAPA together with Glass-Steagall and together with the credit system, you're not serious. And that has to be kept in mind. There are not particular issues which arise from, shall we say, a local candidacy, a regional candidacy, which are qualified as campaign issues, unless the full panoply of Glass-Steagall, the credit system, and NWAPA are put forth jointly. Because if you don't have the 3 things equally proposed, you don't have anything. And that's the thing you've got to concentrate on. Now, I just had a pass-by with another broadcast I was involved in just a few minutes ago, in which we didn't have the time to get into these three things as short as we could. So now that's it. We've got to realize from this point on, you don't have one program, you don't have a selected program, you have three programs. National Campaign Act. One, Glass-Steagall, pushed all the time. The credit system, which has been very little pushed effectively, all the time. And then NWAPA, all the time. I think the big lead thing is going to be for candidates is going with NWAPA very much up front. After identifying the 3 points, go at NWAPA first. Why? Say, NWAPA means that we're going to immediately launch a program which will have 6 million jobs specifically associated with it. One will be NWAPA itself, which is 4 million jobs. And these are going to become high technology jobs. They're going to be concentrated to a very large degree in the western half of the United States. But we are also going to rebuild the entire economy, which means like areas in the eastern part of the United States, as in the former auto region, are also going to have to be pushed up at the same rate. And so therefore, without that kind of programmatic presentation, starting with you go identify the elements, the three elements. The three elements that are decisive. Without this, this nation cannot be saved. This nation is doomed if we don't get these three elements, which means you've got to get rid of Obama in the process. First, you've got to get the Glass-Steagall. It's all ready to go. Go with it. But don't stop there, because you've got to go to a credit system as opposed to a financial system or monetary system right away. But to lead, once you state the 3 points, you've got to state then what's required. And that is the full driver program and the specification that we're going to create that number of jobs through Glass-Steagall, but that the other two conditions are indispensable to making that program, that NWAPA program, work. And NWAPA is necessary to make those other two features work. And that's, you've got to hit the population with that, because what you really want to do, you don't want to get the population stirred up about something they like or something they like. That's the usual foolish stuff that happens in most campaigns, which is why most president campaigns fail. Because they try to go on an issue. They try to go on one issue. This is my issue. This is my issue. This is my issue. If you don't go with all three issues, and effectively, you're not going anyplace, especially when you're limited to 5 candidates. If you want 5 candidates to make an impact on the nation, you've got to take all 3 equally and present them equally, and present them by what is the recovery program? How are you going to get your health care back? How are you going to get your life back? You need NWAPA. Otherwise, you're not going to get your life back. And therefore, to do that means you've got to go to, first of all, get the Glass-Steagall in there without question. Don't worry about the banks that are going to go belly up. They're dead anyway. So don't try to marry a dead man and hope for children. You've got to take the whole panoply and present it effectively, and you've got to start with, at the end, you end your series, as I did, but then you dwell on NWAPA. Do you know what NWAPA means? It means starting real quick, 6 million high-quality jobs to build the families and build the economy of the United States again. The other things are the necessary policies. But the thing that's going to make it work is going to be NWAPA. And we have all the material out there. We're putting it out. Mm-hmm. And this is what we have. At this point, we can't fool around with issues. We've got to take the 3 projects, put it logically, and emphasize the big bang is NWAPA. Hey, would you like 6 million good jobs in the United States right now? And that's the killer. You've got to burn it into them. So they can't forget it. And maybe one of you will come up with the little mysterious dog, which is going to help help the whole process along as seasoning. Anyway, that's the point. Emphasize the whole package, present it effectively, present it with the dynamite. 6 million jobs, starting the minute we start the next presidency. 6 million jobs. Do you want that? Isn't that better than starving to death?
That's definitely the challenge. It's interesting because at this debate we just had yesterday in New Jersey, for one, they're trying desperately to silence discussion of Glass-Steagall. And there was a hilarious outburst at one point because one of the candidates who had not shown up at the first debate actually was asked, where do you stand on Glass-Steagall and do you know what it is? And he went bonkers and said, this is a LaRouche issue. I'm not going to touch it. I don't have to explain it. I don't have to answer anything. But all of the press coverage, again, covered Glass-Steagall, that I support Glass-Steagall and NWAPA. They had, one article had almost an entire paragraph about NWAPA, about the water irrigation and the drinking water irrigation for the western part of the United States. One of the questions said that the person had 2 nephews who committed suicide because they had no jobs. So this is really on people's minds. I think it is a challenge. No one knows how to handle the question of credit because they're all obsessed about money. So they'll talk about taxes, they'll talk about money for this versus money for that, cut this so you can pay that. The credit question is a very difficult one to get through to the American voters.
Therefore, you've got to go with the specific question of jobs.
Exactly, and I think what we're finding is that there's a real demoralization in the population, and we're not just talking about jobs. We're talking about how to restore a sense of dignity, a sense of mission back to the population. And, you know, I could say just in terms of the campaign organizing we've done here, when we present this clear solution, it gives people a sense of respect about themselves, about what type of nation that they're in. And right now, the demoralization that's set in, you can see that the effects that this is having on how people have decided, I don't want to take responsibility anymore. Both parties have misled the nation, have destroyed the nation. And I was just thinking about at an event, a campaign event I went to yesterday, there was a lady who said, you know, I waited until I was 50 years old to vote, and I voted for Obama because I thought it was going to make a difference, and I never had voted a day in my life before. And now I'm in great despair, and I'm saying, for what reason did we do this? Why? And you have people like that who have said, okay, there's no reason to actually fight. And what they're getting as a sense of what our national slate represents from these very solutions that we're putting out is that the reason they have to fight is because this is what this mission, the Glass-Steagall, the credit system, and the North American Water and Power Alliance is what gives them a sense that they can actually do something to turn this crisis around, to contribute back to society, to ensure that we won't continue to go along with the system that has failed us, or choosing the lesser of two evils. The lesser of two evils is still gotten us in the same rotten position. But you could say, don't choose the lesser of two evils, turn over the chessboard and choose the alternative. And the alternative is what we're proposing, that's going to give you a sense of what you really represent, what we really represent in society, how we can change the situation we're in. And this question is, what we're finding is getting enough people to recognize that quickly, getting enough people to go with Glass-Steagall to push these policies in a rapid manner, because we're really running out of time to be able to do it.
And you've got one thing, you've got a former president of the United States who killed the whole system of national banking. And that has to be done. He has to be roasted. We're not going to have that kind of Democrat anymore. We want a Franklin Roosevelt Democrat, not that kind of bum anymore. And he's the guy that ruined us. And we got that. This kind of issue has to be brought forward as a burning issue. Because the problem you've got with the Democratic Party, you have to shame the Democratic Party into coming back, the Democratic voters to coming back into being human again. Say, stop this nonsense. Huh? Andy Jackson was a bum. And Andy Jackson set up a tradition which made the United States the mess it's been so many times in these elections.
That also came up at the debate, and I know Keisha has spoken a lot about Kennedy and FDR. And when I brought it up at the debate, one of the candidates said, "Don't talk about these icons from the past." I mean, so it's just the total rejection of why would anyone be a Democrat other than that? And of course, you, Lynn, the LaRouche Democrats, but other than that, what on earth is there in the Democratic Party that we want to be with?
Well, you've got a good thing there yourself. You've got that thing. You can use that for how shameful it is that some candidates think they're candidates are saying such things. Can you imagine what a shameful thing that is? You can say it on the street and everywhere. They can't limit you. They can't censor you.
Right. And, I mean, what Diane said is absolutely true. I mean, the absurdity of trying to suppress the discussion around Glass-Steagall, which you're seeing from the party hacks of the Democratic Party. I know she saw that in the debate she just had, but also we're seeing the same thing here. My opponents that are going against us, they won't even mention Glass-Steagall. The most they'll mention about it is that I want to support an obscure banking policy. But the reality is that you're seeing a major escalation around the support for Glass-Steagall. You look at what's coming out right now with Elizabeth Warren, what's happening in terms of the numbers of people increasing that are signing on to Glass-Steagall, and this just goes to show you how far away removed from reality the Democratic Party has become in defense of an insane president who is against everything that this nation represents. And it just goes to show you how much these guys are freaked out by trying to defend the interest of Obama and his Wall Street and London backers, and they have no way of doing that because they're sort of backed into a corner with what we're seeing coming out in terms of the support of these policies.
Exactly. But you got to hang a few characters, you know. A lynching party of a certain type is necessary. A political lynching party, not a physical one.
They're hanging themselves.
It's true. They are hanging themselves. My Democratic Party opponent, responded to a newspaper article which went through how my campaign is for the impeachment of Obama and listed the various reasons why Obama is impeachable. And then their response was, well, our candidate is out raising money, and he's a real Democrat because Democrats don't have the right to call for the impeachment of the president. So we looked at, okay, he's raising money. Who is he raising money from? And lo and behold, he is raising money from J.P. Morgan Chase.
Great.
So if that's what makes you a real Democrat, then that doesn't speak well of the Democratic Party these days.
Well, I tell you, I know this has been brought up before, but where you do have in the cities and the Obama money coming in for the campaigns, it's a little bit of a police state mentality. People, they'll kind of tell you on the side, look, I agree with your policy, Glass-Steagall, we're all for it, but publicly I'm going to say one thing. But yet when you get out into some of these areas around, say, the Nawapa territory, and you just have an electric response of people that where that clampdown isn't quite there yet, And you have in some of these rural areas where people are there, I mean, the whole nation is going under, but they will see immediately what kind of benefit this will bring, and are right there. That we're getting a certain response in that way from these resolutions that we're pushing around the county commissions and so on. So I just think if we had just drive it as a national policy, and I know Bill and I, through some of the meetings that we had over the last couple of weeks, that you'd bring it up to people that when Bill was out here in Seattle and then I was in the Detroit area, and people might at first say, well, why are you out here, and conversely, why are you out here? But you lay it out that this is a national mission, and therefore, and there could be nothing less than this at this point. And I think that comes back to what you're saying with the credit system, is that the only something of this magnitude could fulfill the massive credit that's going to be needed to be put back into the system after the Glass-Steagall policy goes through. Because once that goes through, all of Wall Street's gambling chits are thrown in the dump.
Have some fun. You'd have some fun in this way. Now, what's Obama's first major crime, apart from being born? His first major crime as a president was killing health care, which is not just killing health care, it's killing people.
Right.
Now, what you say, well, you also talk about people going to NWAPA programs. Well, these are high-risk programs that require a lot of protection of health. We've got to rebuild the health care system so we can implement those 6 million jobs for NWAPA. And someone says, what about the rest of us? Well, we think they should get it too. And going with NWAPA will help create the income basis for which we can help to restore the health care system that Obama took away from us.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're definitely getting that same type of response of total openness on the policies, along with hatred of Obama, which we've discussed a bit. You saw it in things like the election in West Virginia and whatnot. It's definitely across the board. The problem with the Democratic constituency is that they're just simply afraid of getting Romney. But as soon as you put out the alternative policy, and I think the idea that you're bringing up here of the FDR tradition in the Democratic Party as the only way to survive, we're definitely getting a very sound response everywhere in the population. And I think on this question of the monetary versus credit system, that's very ripe right now as well, because there still are people concerned about the debt or whatnot, and you say, well, we can't fund NWAPA, how do you do it? But it's really clear with things like the recent breakdown of JP Morgan that there's a difference between a monetary breakdown and a physical breakdown. And I think if you make the point, while we're not talking about dollars that JP Morgan just lost, we're talking about the loss of the industrial capacity of the nation, the loss of our space capacity as a nation. Like you could look at that as dollars lost in terms of amount of plant capacity and whatnot. I mean, there's a physical breakdown of whole industries and whole scientific capabilities that could be measured in a monetary way, but you could see its effects in a physical way. I mean, people can get that, the fact that we really lost our nation, and that's sort of inverse to what you're bringing up in terms of what we can give them through NWAPA.
Rachel, actually, I had a discussion a while back, but it was a guy that was a buyer for Boeing, and I went into the program, Glass-Steagall, the credit system, and NWAPA. And on the credit system, he said, hey, wait a second, this is how we do things at Boeing. And I said, all right, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, in Boeing, when we're dealing with, say, these big contracts with nations, they often won't have the cash to put up to buy the shipment of planes, right? So they have, say, coal, but Boeing's not interested in coal, so we'll take the coal and we'll sell it over here at one price, and then They might have something else that, uranium, whatever. And by a certain process of exchange, which really he was describing it as a kind of a barter system, But what it struck me is that he had at least the beginnings of thinking about, you're not thinking about it from a monetary standpoint, at least, probably in some ways he's thinking about it from the standpoint of speculation. But on the other hand, if you start thinking about the flow of materials and the organization of society presently, to orient it towards then a higher phase of existence, the increasing energy flux density, it does help to think in those terms to kind of get more at what a credit system is. So I was kind of just throw that in as a point of reference that, when people start at least thinking of it from a physical economic standpoint versus just money.
A physical standpoint means energy flux density. What's the difference between one person being employed and another person being employed? What is the energy flux density being supplied per capita in various expressions on which the productive powers of labor depend? What's your productivity? What's your income? Your income has to be derived from your productivity. Your productivity is expressed largely in a correlative of energy flux density. So if you were talking about various kinds of mechanisms of low energy flux density production, low energy flux density production is a waste. It kills people. Relying upon solar radiation is going to kill people because it's going to deprive them of the power to be productive. It's energy flux density as in the hands of mankind and in the mind of mankind, which determines what the productive powers of labor are, which will determine what the conditions of life, how many people can live, what their chances of living are. And so this concept of when you get to NWAPA, that's what comes up immediately, because you're talking about energy flux density. Now you've got all these figures, which we've already have in the manual, on what the energy flux density is, what's required, and why all this other stuff is junk. So someone says, we're going to have these kinds of jobs. You're an idiot. You want these kinds of jobs. You need high energy flux density employment, which means you can't do it with solar power. That's idiot. That's for idiots. That's for dead people. And that's that kind of thing. These are the kinds of things which we have to pour in. You've all got them. You all know how to do it. But pour it in this last phase of going into this election campaign.
Oh, one thing on this idea of credit as a real physical idea. I was talking to a guy in Indiana, labor president, and he was saying, well, I had trouble getting across to my guys at the local how this is going to create jobs for them. But then as we started discussing NWAPA and how large it is, he said, well, of course this is going to create jobs for us. I mean, I got to connect though. There's a railroad company here, and they create continuous weld rail that's a third of a mile long that they can just load onto rail cars and send it on the railroad to wherever rail needs to be built. And the rail is designed in such a way that it actually can bend as the train goes around curves. So it's just interesting that you take something like that and you take other things which in today's economy there's barely any of this type of room for real experimental research and development activity. But once you've got a project where it's clear there's going to be continuous development for 25, 30 years, it's a virtual, you have an assurance that the necessity is there for these types of developments and for all these breakthroughs, and you're gonna, that's one of the things that you're going to get in this whole process is breakthroughs in the industrial process.
Yeah, these people are so desperate for jobs that they can't think straight. I was reading an article in the local paper here about these stupid solar panels that they're putting up, and to have solar panels, the ratepayers, that is the New Jersey customers who depend on electricity, are going to continue having to pay extra until 2028. So we're quote unquote creating jobs by putting up these solar panels, but apparently, as we all know, they don't generate any energy. So the ratepayers have to pay for the ugly sight of them on every telephone pole until 2028. And it is a challenge with some of these guys, the union guys and so on, because they are so desperate. They have 30-40% unemployment. You say, no, it's not jobs. It's a question of the future. Wouldn't you rather be working in something that was actually productive, that actually generates something for future generations and is not just a waste? And one guy got it. He said, you know, it did occur to me, how come we're still using a combustion engine 100 years later? So they can get it, but the argument for this stuff is really crazy. It's like saying, well, we could create a lot more jobs if we got rid of automobiles and trains, because people would have to go by foot and use horses, and you'd need a lot more of them, which is not really the direction that we want to go.
I think one thing about what you've expressed is this question with NWAPA. What we're actually discussing is, how do you actually define what the true value of human life is? And we're not talking about putting a price tag on human life. And so you change the conception of the value of human beings in society, where you can't have a cost-effective measure. You can't have a Hitler T4 policy in healthcare when you're talking about something like NWAPA, because you have a different perspective of the value of the defending the general well-being and welfare of every one of your citizens, because of the commitment of those citizens to the contributions back to society and back to posterity that they're going to bring forward. And I mean, I think that just makes a whole lot of sense in terms of thinking about why it is that the mustache on Obama freaked so many people out, because the people that had freaked out are the people who say it's too many people on the planet, that we need to depopulate the planet. And when you talk about something like NWAPA, you're talking about every single human being is meaningful, and the contributions of every single human being is going to actually increase tenfold the energy flux density of the development of our society. And so now you're saying, well, yeah, this is why we need Hilberton standards of our healthcare system. So you can say, okay, how are you going to protect the health and well-being of each and every one of your citizens, so that they will be contributing productively back to society? And so it really, NWAPA gives a different perspective in terms of how you crush this whole system that has put this monetary value on the lives of people, to now put the understanding of what is the true value in the meaning of true value in human life.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's the key with, I mean, what you're emphasizing about these three programs as one, with Glass-Steagall, the credit system, and NWAPA. I mean, you really are in Franklin Roosevelt territory, but if you look at the Franklin Roosevelt program, not any one of his programs in isolation would have worked without the others. No. It was one completely integrated system. And I know in reviewing the final section of the NWAPA 21 special report, which is the entire credit system brought to life, you begin to understand that there's no way that one part of this system can be implemented without the entirety of all the rest. And that's the kind of complete integration, unification that is necessary to understand.
That's where we are. We're at the point where this unified conception of a mission. And you're also coming to a point now which the war question is on the table big time. For example, the key thing to bear in mind as you get out there campaigning is the fact that, you know, these characters around Obama and so are saying that the Russians are faking it out. There is no threat from Russia if they go ahead with the program in Eastern Europe. The fact is that Russia has itself has a thermonuclear weapons capability which is very close to that of the United States. Russia also has, and Europe has very little otherwise, and they're very little in depth. For example, in the recent war where Obama ran, it was the United States that did practically all the shooting.
Right.
Because Europe didn't have the reserves to do that kind of shooting. So the issue here is that we're at the point that Russia does have the capability of doing exactly what it said it can do. China is an ally of Russia in this same category. India has a similar capability of a somewhat different organization. So Russia does have the ability to practically cause the extermination of the United States. So, of course, Russia itself might be exterminated at the same time in this process. But when the President of the United States and other lying idiots and fools say that Russia's military capability is a joke, they're spitting in the face of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States and those of other nations know exactly what this capability is. Presidents beforehand, Kennedy, for example, President Kennedy emphasized, as others had emphasized, exactly this. The capability of the United States and other leading nations, the United States and Russia and China and India, for example, they have a capability to exterminate the human species. And when someone says that Russia doesn't have anything, Russia has about the same capability in terms of throw power as the United States. So when the President of the United States and his flunkies start saying that Russia doesn't have anything in terms of military capability, weapons capability, they are actually putting the entire population of the United States at risk. We cannot fight on this planet. We cannot have a thermonuclear war on this planet. The human species would not probably survive it. If it didn't exterminate everybody at once, this after effects of such a bombardment would probably exterminate the last of the people. When the President of the United States and fools around him are saying that Russia doesn't have any serious, that is faking it, they are putting the existence of the United States and the world at risk. And now you've seen the Joint Chiefs of Staff, unlike our stupid president or our mentally sick president, have understood clearly what the risk is of the United States becoming engaged in a nuclear conflict in the Middle East region in particular. Because the launching of such a warfare in the Middle East would mean a global warfare which would come out immediately and would probably either exterminate the human population entirely or create the post-war conditions which would exterminate the human species. That's the risk. And when this president and the damn fools that supported him said something which the Joint Chiefs of Staff have understood is a lie, and the President of the United States is lying on the question of strategic issues. This is where we are. And if we don't get this president out, and we don't have anybody on the Republican side who's worth anything, who's actually running, if we don't, we have the responsibility in the period ahead, between now and then, nearby, we have to actually make an impact which will change this situation. Russia is quite serious, and our Joint Chiefs of Staff understand this quite clearly. When the President of the United States says something contrary to what the Joint Chiefs of Staff understand. The President of the United States has made himself immediately impeachable because he's a damn liar in this issue. The President of the United States, by telling people that there is no risk in terms of Russian nuclear capabilities, thermonuclear capabilities, is lying to the American people, and that in itself is an impeachable offense for cause. The very fact that he endorses such a policy means he must be thrown out of office on that charge alone. When the President of the United States makes a statement whose effect is to tell the American people that there's no threat from Russian thermonuclear weapons, he's committed a crime, an impeachable offense of the highest order against the United States. And he's done it on the instructions of his British masters, the royal family. That's another aspect of this thing that has to be borne in mind. See, the point is, we're smarter than Obama is, that's true. A lot smarter. That's why he has to tell lies. If he didn't have to tell lies, if he knew anything, he wouldn't have to tell lies. So the president is a liar, but that's an impeachable offense when you're the president of the United States, when you go out and start telling lies about things like this. You can put us at risk, put the human species at risk. That's a criminal offense of the highest degree. Anybody who's going to support Obama has got a real question to face. People, particularly people in high office. If they're defending Obama, when Obama's telling lies like that, terrible lies, then those politicians aren't fit to serve in office. They should all be thrown out. I think we could do better from scratch than use politicians like that as our guides. But we're at the point. We're at this point right now. We're coming to a point of crisis. And when they said that, why do you think Obama would tell a lie like that? The Joint Chiefs of Staff and others have told him quite the contrary. They've warned him quite the contrary. Why is he telling that lie? Why does this man lie all the time? Lie about almost everything. And what's wrong with us that we sit back and let him get by with these lies? We don't consider what the implications of those lies are. When the President of the United States says there's no risk in attacking Russia in this matter, when Russia has said understandably and correctly, in terms of facts, what this means. And this guy is still allowed to be President of the United States when he's the worst damned liar, and I do mean damned, on this planet right now. This man should be thrown out of office now. And either people who won't do that are guilty of either stupidity or lack of guts, or maybe both. It's time we give a shock to this nation that the United States is being placed in jeopardy of its existence by this president's mouth. And we should remove his mouth from the White House. Find some other place to put him and get a different mouth to guide us in our policies. Is a fine old feast of justice which our voices have to bring out and forth at this time.
I think Obama's owners are totally desperate because this moment really could be the end of the British Empire, and that's why they're prepared to push the world to the end. It's like Zeus. They just had this G8 meeting, and Greece is very likely to leave the euro. They have no choice. The population doesn't want the austerity. They're not suicidal, even though some elected officials there are. And my understanding was that the G8 summit, what you had from Obama's team and the British is that we should just print as much money as necessary, just flood the ECB to do everything we can to keep Greece in the system. That's a totally desperate move. That's going to either crash everything now or cause hyperinflation. So the empire is at its end. And that's really the issue, I think, to get across to the Americans and ourselves, is the smell of victory against this damn British Empire for once and for all. Their view is they're prepared to take the entire world down, to go to nuclear war to avoid that fate. They don't want to have nations which refuse to give up their sovereignty and refuse to give up their scientific progress. They've lost control. Nothing they can do anymore in their system works or will work, and it's failing even in the short term, which is the desperation driving this crazy lunatic that we have in the White House.
Precisely. And any doubt or ambiguity as to the consequences of allowing Obama to remain in the White House no longer exist. So I think that's a good conclusion to our discussion today. Thank you all for joining us, and be sure to tune in next week.